They told you that you were broken, that the weight pressing down on your chest was proof you'd never stand tall again, that the wounds carved into your soul were permanent, that you'd always walk with a limp, always be one step behind the ones who were whole. They made you believe that the cracks in you were flaws, not battle scars, that you were weak because you struggled, because you fell, because the fire inside you flickered instead of roared. And for a long time, you believed them. You swallowed their words like bitter medicine, convinced that maybe, just maybe, accepting their diagnosis was easier than proving them wrong. You let their lies seep into your skin, let them take root in your bones. You wore your pain like a second skin, carried it like a name tag that said, "This is who I am broken." But let me tell you something. That was never your name. That was never your truth. That was never who you were meant to be. Look around. Look at the wreckage. Look at the ruins of the person you once were. The one who spent years apologizing for taking up space, for existing too loudly or too quietly, for wanting more than the small life they handed you. Look at the shattered remains of the old you, the one who kept their head down, the one who let fear decide their future. It's all around you, isn't it? The remnants of a battle no one ever thought you'd win. They didn't expect you to make it this far. They counted on your silence, on your surrender. They thought you'd stay down when they pushed you, that you'd never find the strength to claw your way out of the pit they left you in. But here's what they don't know. Here's what they will never understand. You were never fragile. You were never weak. You were never broken. You were buried. And the thing about being buried, given enough time, you grow. For too long, you have mistaken survival for weakness. But survival is not proof that you are frail. It is proof that you are unbreakable. Do you hear me? You are unbreakable. You have taken every hit, every loss, every moment that should have destroyed you, and you are still standing. Maybe you're bruised, maybe you're tired, maybe there are days when your bones feel like they are made of glass, and the weight of your own existence feels unbearable. But you are here, and that means you are stronger than they ever wanted you to be. They built a cage for you, not with steel, not with locks, but with words, with expectations, with carefully crafted lies designed to keep you small. From the moment you were old enough to dream, they handed you a script, a role to play. Be quiet, be obedient, be grateful for whatever scraps they throw your way. And maybe you played the part for a while. Maybe you convinced yourself that it was easier to fit into the mold than to shatter it. Maybe you thought, if I just keep my head down, if I just work hard enough, if I just stay in line, one day they will see me. One day they will let me be more. But that day never came, because it was never supposed to. Because the ones who benefit from your silence will never hand you a microphone. Because the ones who profit from your obedience will never show you the way out. So let me ask you, how much longer are you going to wait for permission to rise? How much longer will you let them convince you that you are too weak to fight? How much longer will you live inside the story they wrote for you? You were conditioned to believe that you are fragile, that your dreams are too big, your voice too loud, your ambition too reckless, that the world is meant for other people, for the strong, for the lucky, for the chosen few. And maybe, for a while, you accepted that. Maybe for a while you thought, this is just the way things are. But tell me, does that thought not set fire to something deep inside you? Does that not make you want to scream, to rip apart the fabric of every lie they wrapped around your shoulders? Because I know you. I know there is a fire inside you that refuses to die. I know that no matter how much they tried to bury you, there was always a part of you that never stopped fighting for air. Life didn't break you all at once. It was slow. It was insidious. It was the small betrayals, the quiet disappointments, the moments of rejection that left tiny, imperceptible cracks in your heart. It was the time they told you that your dreams were impossible, and you believed them. The time you loved with everything you had, and they walked away anyway. The time you reached for something greater, and the world laughed in your face. Each moment, another fracture. Each failure, another reason to believe they were right about you. And so you shrank. You built walls, thinking they would keep you safe. You convinced yourself that if you just expected less, if you just aimed lower, you wouldn't have to feel the weight of disappointment again. You dimmed your light because shining meant being seen, and being seen meant being hurt. And hurt, you learned how to stay small, how to fade into the background, how to exist without truly living. But tell me, is that enough for you? Is that all you want, to go through life as a shadow, as a whisper of what you could have been? Because I don't believe that's what you were meant for. I don't believe that's where your story ends. And I sure as hell don't believe you are too broken to rise. You've spent your whole life waiting for someone to give you a reason to believe in yourself. Waiting for permission, for validation, for a sign. But let me tell you the truth you've been avoiding. The only permission you need is your own. The only validation that matters is the one you give yourself. The only sign you'll ever get is the fire burning in your own chest, the hunger that refuses to die no matter how many times you've tried to silence it. You are not weak, you are not small, and you are not broken. You were never broken. You were just waiting for the moment you would finally see yourself for who you truly are. And that moment, it's now. This is the day you decide. This is the day they learn that everything they believed about you was wrong. This is the day they realize that no matter how many times they tried to bury you, no matter how many times they tried to silence you, you cannot be broken. Because you were never meant to stay down. You were meant to rise. There was a moment when it all started to fall apart. Maybe you didn't notice it at first. Maybe it was subtle, like a crack in the foundation that didn't seem like much until the whole structure started caving in. Or maybe it was sudden, like a dam breaking, like a tidal wave crashing into everything you thought was stable. Either way, there was a moment, a shift, a fracture in the reality you once believed in. And that moment, that was the beginning of the fall. You can still feel it, can't you? The weight of it, the way the air changed, the way the ground beneath you, once so steady, suddenly felt like quicksand. You weren't prepared for it. How could you have been? One day you were holding everything together, managing, surviving, and then before you knew it, the walls you had built around yourself collapsed. And no matter how hard you tried, no matter how desperately you clawed at the wreckage, you couldn't stop it from falling. Maybe it was financial ruin, the suffocating realization that no matter how hard you worked, you were still drowning. Maybe it was heartbreak, the gut-wrenching agony of watching someone you love walk away as if you were nothing. Maybe it was rejection, the sting of hearing no, when all you wanted was one chance. Maybe it was something worse. Maybe it wasn't one big thing at all. Maybe it was a series of small, quiet devastations, each one chipping away at you until you no longer recognize the person in the mirror. That's the cruel thing about falling. It doesn't always happen in a single, dramatic moment. Sometimes it's slow. Sometimes it's the little things that break you. The job you never got, the dream you gave up on, the person who stopped choosing you, the days that felt so heavy you didn't even have the strength to open your eyes, to face the world, to try. And the worst part, no one noticed. No one saw how deep you were sinking. No one knew how close you were to disappearing altogether. And so, you stopped talking about it. You told yourself no one would understand, that they were tired of hearing about your pain. You smiled when you needed to. You laughed at the right moments. You nodded when they asked if you were okay. And all the while, you were unraveling. You were falling, but you did it quietly, carefully, so no one would see. At first, you fought against it. You tried to hold on. You told yourself it was just a rough patch, that things would get better. That if you could just make it to the next day, the next paycheck, the next opportunity, then maybe everything would turn around. But it didn't. And eventually the weight of trying became heavier than the weight of falling. So you let go. That was the moment, wasn't it? The moment when you stopped reaching for the surface. The moment when you accepted the fall. And that was when you found yourself in the darkest place. This is the place where hope dies. The place where you stop believing in better days. Where you stop believing in yourself. This is the place where the world feels like a cage, where every door is locked, where every road leads to nowhere. This is the place where you lose your voice, where you silence your own screams because you've convinced yourself that no one is listening. And maybe you don't even remember how you got here. Maybe one day, you just woke up and realized that you weren't living anymore. You were just existing, just going through the motions, just waiting for something, anything, to pull you out of the hole you didn't even realize you had fallen into. But nothing came. No hand reached down to save you. No miracle arrived at your doorstep. And so you stayed there, in the darkness, in the silence, in the numbness that became your new normal. You used to be a fighter. You used to have dreams, ambitions, fire in your veins. But here, that fire has burned out. Here, every effort feels pointless. Every step forward feels like walking into a storm. Here, even breathing feels like a battle. And yet, you are still here. Do you see that? Do you understand what that means? Even in your darkest place, even when you believed you had nothing left, even when the weight of your own existence threatened to crush you, you are still here. You wanted to disappear, but you didn't. You wanted to give up, but some part of you, some small, stubborn part of you, held on. Maybe you don't see it yet. Maybe you don't believe it, but there is something inside you that refused to let go completely. Something inside you that still, even now, even here, wants to fight. And that means you have not lost. Not yet. There is a strange kind of comfort in staying down, in the darkness, in the numbness, in the quiet resignation that says this is just the way things are. After all, the ground can't betray you. The floor never disappears beneath your feet. If you don't try, you can't fail. If you don't hope, you can't be disappointed. There is a safety in surrender, in allowing yourself to believe that life has already made its decision about you, that maybe, just maybe, you were never meant to rise. You tell yourself it doesn't hurt anymore, that you've made peace with the weight pressing down on you, that you've learned to live with the ache. You convince yourself that there is dignity in accepting your fate, that fighting is nothing more than delaying the inevitable, and so you stay, not because it feels good, but because it feels safe, because getting up means risking another fall, another failure, another reminder that maybe you were never strong enough to stand in the first place. Lying on the ground hurts less than falling again, doesn't it? That's the thought that keeps you trapped, the fear that if you try, if you reach for something beyond this, you will only end up back here, broken in ways you might not recover from. And so, you build a home in the wreckage. You make excuses for why you can't leave. You blame the world, the circumstances, the people who wronged you. You say, if only things had been different, if only I had been given the same chances as them, if only I weren't so tired, if only I weren't so afraid. But deep down, you know the truth. The truth is that pain, no matter how unbearable, is still familiar. And familiarity, even when it's miserable, feels easier than the unknown. Because what happens if you try to rise and the world pushes you back down? What happens if you fight and still lose? What happens if you dare to believe in something greater, only to have it ripped away from you again? That's the trap, isn't it? The one that keeps you small. The one that convinces you that failure is worse than never trying. The one that makes you think that blending in, staying quiet, playing it safe, is somehow a better option than risking greatness. Because the truth is, they want you to stay afraid. They need you to. There are entire systems built on keeping you afraid, on keeping you obedient, on making sure you never recognize your own power. They hand you a life already outlined in small, timid steps. Go to school, get a job, pay your bills, stay in line, don't ask for too much, don't stand out too much, don't take up too much space. Be grateful for what you have. Be realistic, be practical. They tell you that reaching for more is selfish, that dreaming too big is foolish, that wanting to break free is dangerous. And maybe you've bought into it. Maybe you've spent your whole life living in a cage without even realizing the door was never locked. Maybe you've been so conditioned to follow the rules, to stay within the lines, that you never stop to ask, who benefits from your obedience? Who gains from your silence? The answer? Not you. They will never tell you this, but the moment you decide to rise, the moment you decide to take back your power, the moment you refuse to be small, it shakes the foundation of everything they've built. Because people who know their own strength cannot be controlled. People who see their own worth cannot be manipulated. And people who refuse to stay down, they change the world. But before you can rise, you must face the voice inside you, the one that still, even now, refuses to die. It's faint, barely a whisper beneath the noise of your fears, but it's there. That small, relentless part of you that has never stopped believing in something more. That voice that tells you this is not where your story ends. That part of you that knows there is more to you than this. Do you feel it? The stirring, the restless energy beneath the weight of your doubt. The ember buried beneath the ashes of everything you've lost. It's not gone. It never was. You are not powerless. You never were. And maybe, for the first time in a long time, you are starting to believe that. Something shifts. It's not loud. It's not a sudden explosion. It's not some grand cinematic moment where everything suddenly makes sense. No, it's subtle. It's quiet. Like the first crack of dawn after an endless night, like the first breath of air after being underwater for too long. It's the moment you stop accepting defeat as your destiny, the moment you stop mistaking survival for surrender. You thought you were weak. You thought your pain was proof that you were broken, that the weight pressing down on you meant you weren't strong enough to carry it. But here's the truth. The world did not break you. It buried you. And there is a difference. The difference between death and dormancy. The difference between being defeated and simply waiting for the right moment to rise. You never lacked strength. You lacked belief in your strength. They made sure of that. They fed you stories about resilience that were never meant to empower you. They were meant to tame you, to make you think that real strength is quiet obedience, that real warriors endure suffering in silence, that to struggle is to fail. But you are starting to see through it now, aren't you? You are starting to understand that the only thing more dangerous than pain is what happens when you decide to use it. Your pain is not proof of your weakness. It is proof that you have lived, that you have loved, that you have risked something greater than comfort. Every scar, every betrayal, every moment that should have shattered you, it is fuel. It is raw material waiting for you to set it alight. Your pain is a match. Light the fire. Let it burn away the doubt. Let it turn every loss into a lesson, every failure into a foundation. Let the weight of your past become the force that propels you forward. You don't need to erase what happened to you. You need to transform it. You need to look at everything that ever tried to break you and realize that all it did was make you unstoppable. Because that's the part they never told you, isn't it? That real strength isn't found in perfection. It isn't found in the ones who never fall, never hurt, never struggle. No, real strength belongs to the ones who keep getting back up. The ones who refuse to stay down, no matter how many times the world knocks them to their knees. They told you that strength looks like never being afraid, never doubting yourself, never needing help, but that was a lie. Strength is standing up even when your legs shake. Strength is walking forward even when your heart is full of fear. Strength is looking at your own reflection and deciding that despite everything, you are still worthy of fighting for. And that is what makes you dangerous. Because now for the first time, you are seeing yourself as you truly are. Not fragile, not broken, but unbreakable. Who are you without the chains? Who are you when you strip away the weight of expectations, the guilt, the fear, the stories they've forced upon you? You have spent so long living within a version of yourself that was never truly yours. A version carefully constructed by the voices that told you who you were allowed to be, how much space you were allowed to take up, how loud you were allowed to speak. But now, the chains are breaking, and the question that remains is this: who were you always meant to be? They called you weak, but you were never weak. You were waiting for the moment when the fire inside you burned hotter than the fear they planted in your mind, waiting for the day you would stop playing small. That day is now. You are no longer the person who accepted less than they deserved. You are no longer the person who mistook endurance for purpose. Your survival was never meant to be the ceiling of your existence. It was only the foundation. So craft yourself anew, not from pain, not from suffering, but from power, from the raw, undeniable truth that you have always been more than what they saw in you, that the limits they placed on you were never real, that every label they forced upon you was nothing but a cage built from fear. Their fear. Because the moment you understand your own worth, you become unstoppable. And to truly rise, the lies must die. The falsehoods that kept you tethered. The belief that you are only as valuable as what you can offer others. The story that says you are only worthy of love if you are perfect. The quiet, insidious lie that says success belongs to other people, but not to you. Burn them all. Burn the shame, burn the doubt, burn the voice in your head that whispers, "Who do you think you are?" Because I will tell you who you are. You are not the names they called you. You are not the failures they made you believe define you. You are not your past, your mistakes, your lowest moments. You are something far greater than that. You are limitless, you are untamed, and you are ready to rise. But before you do, the world will try one last time to pull you back. Doubt will claw at you, whispering old fears, reminding you of the times you tried before and failed. The world will place obstacles in your path, test your resolve, see if you still have it in you to fight. And in that moment, you must ask yourself the only question that matters. Are you willing to bet on yourself? Because no one else can do this for you. No one else can rise for you. No one else can claim the life that was meant for you. This is your moment, and the choice is yours. So tell me, what will you do? Will you shrink back into the shadows of the life you once lived? Or will you stand up, unshaken, and show the world that you were never broken, never weak, never less than everything you were always meant to be? The time has come. Choose to rise. You see it now, don't you? The illusion has shattered. The walls they built around you have crumbled. You have walked through the fire, stripped of every lie, every limitation, every false identity they forced upon you. And standing here now, raw and real, you finally understand the truth that was always inside you. No one owns you but you. You have waited long enough. Waited for approval. Waited for the right moment. Waited for someone to see your worth, to tell you that you are ready. But the world doesn't give confidence, it takes it away. And the only way to reclaim it is to take it back. To stop waiting, to decide. You stopped waiting for permission, and that changed everything. Because power isn't something handed to you, it is something claimed, it is something embodied. And once you understand that, once you step fully into your own strength, there is no going back. You are no longer a prisoner of doubt, no longer a product of past wounds, no longer a collection of scars and regrets. You are something else now, something dangerous, something untouchable. And with that power comes the greatest freedom of all, living without apology. You have spent too much time making yourself small, apologizing for your existence, trying to fit into spaces that were never built for you. But you are done playing by their rules. You are done tiptoeing through your own life, afraid of being too much, too bold, too ambitious. Because fear no longer controls you. You own your choices, your voice, your life. You do not owe anyone an explanation for your strength. You do not need to ask permission to take up space. You do not have to justify why you refuse to stay in the cage they built for you. You were never fragile. You were just waiting for the right moment to fight. And now, the world will see. Now they will learn what you have always known deep inside you. That no matter how many times you fell, no matter how many times they tried to break you, no matter how long you spent in the darkness, you are still here. And that means they lost. This is the day they learn you can't be broken. This is the moment you reclaim everything they tried to take from you. This is the moment you rise, not as the person you once were, but as the person you were always meant to be. Stronger, wiser, unshaken, unstoppable. So here is my final question to you. This is your time, will you take it? The past is heavy, isn't it? It lingers like a shadow, whispering reminders of who you used to be, of the mistakes you made, of the moments that broke you. But listen closely. Those whispers are not your truth. The past does not define you. The choices you make next do. You have spent too long carrying the weight of things that no longer serve you. Guilt, regret, resentment. All of it clings to you, convincing you that you are still the same person who once stumbled, who once stayed silent, who once doubted their own power. But you are not that person anymore. You have risen. You have stepped out of the wreckage. You have burned down every false story they forced you to believe. And now it is time for the final severing. Let go of the old wounds, the old fears, the old name they gave you. Cut the ties that tether you to a version of yourself that no longer exists. Leave behind the hesitation, the second guessing, the waiting. You do not belong to the past anymore. You belong to what comes next. And that is the question, isn't it? What happens now? Now you step forward. Now you take every lesson, every battle scar, every ounce of wisdom earned through the fire, and you build something out of it. No more hiding, no more shrinking, no more pretending that you are anything less than limitless. But the choice is still yours. Because the truth is, transformation is terrifying. It demands action. It demands risk. It demands that you step into the unknown, without guarantees, without safety nets, without certainty. So I will ask you once, and only once. You have two choices. Go back to sleep, or wake up and fight. Go back to the comfort of the life you once knew.